It's the All Aussie Rules Football Podcast. Welcome on back. In today's episode, we're going to be checking out the most likely players to be All Australian for the first time in 2025. Stick around, plenty coming up. Welcome on in, everybody, to the All Aussie Rules Football Podcast. This is the fourth episode of 2025 as we continue our countdown until the start of the 2025 AFL season, which is roughly 5 weeks away from the first game in opening round. As we have been doing all pre-season, we're going through teams, we're looking at stuff. That's what we're going to do today. Again, the main part of this episode today is going to be looking at the players that we think are most likely from each club to become first-time All-Australians in 2025. We're also going to end the episode with another little bit of list analysis. We did that a couple episodes ago, so if you haven't checked that out, go check out episode 2 of 2025, where we did a big full deep dive into list age and experience across the competition. We're going to put that into a little bit of a data file which spits out, based on averages, the two most perfectly situated clubs based on the last 15 or so years of AFL football. So that's our plan here. We're going to start, as we usually do, with a little bit of news. Nothing too exciting here. Oh, I guess there is. There's some injury news. First of all, the main one. Matthias Philippou from the Saints is out for a while. He's looking at maybe returning in about 12 weeks to proper training, which is a big miss. So he's going to be missing probably 10 weeks of the AFL season, maybe around about round 10 return to the season. Big loss for him in a year where he was pushing towards looking like he might be really ready to take the next step. There's also other injury news. Josh Smiley from Richmond, picked number 7 in the draft this year, has done his hammy. So he'll be back and ready to go, but he might just miss the first couple of weeks, depending on how his build up to the season goes. Ridley's injured from the Bombers, which is big news as well. So there's a few injuries going around. There's also a lot of talk about players joining new clubs. Apparently Brisbane have approached Oscar Allen, which will be an interesting play if they can pick him up. He is a free agent at the end of the year, so I think there'll be a lot of teams potentially chasing him. And another one, the Cats, they're going for it again. They've chased Matt Rao, which would be a massive get for them. And pretty much replace Dangerfield, who, whether he retires at the end of this year or next year, he's certainly on his way out. So Matt Rao coming in and replacing that would be huge for the Geelong Cats, and just continue on their decade plus of being competitive. There's probably other news. We're going to continue to try and follow it as we go through over the next few weeks heading into the season. If you're new here, don't forget to subscribe, like, all those things. We're going to have football content coming out all the way through the season. Whether you're on Spotify, YouTube, or Apple Podcasts, make sure you do hit that follow button or subscribe, like, comment, all of those things. But also definitely head over to the YouTube channel. That's where most of the content does come out. Like, all the podcast episodes come out on all three forms. But on the YouTube, we do extra. We're going to have season previews for every single club heading into the start of the season. We're going to be doing them in alphabetical order. There'll be about 4 a week all the way through to the start of the season, starting with Adelaide on this Friday, which is like I think it's the 31st. Might be Friday the 31st of January. The first season preview will be going live on YouTube at All Aussie Rules. Go check it out. And then, we'll be alphabetically going through the whole competition. So go check them out, especially your favourite team. But why not check them all out? They'll probably be all roughly 30 minutes or so of content just looking at where your club is, where the club is, what their prospects are for the year, their best players. I look at everything around that club for the year. So yeah, check that all out. There's plenty of content coming your way. Without any further ado, let's jump into the main part of this episode, which is first time All Australians for each club. Starting with Adelaide, as we do most things in All Aussie Rules world, we're going in alphabetical order. So we're starting with the Crows, and as you can see on the screen, if you're watching the video, if you're not, my most likely Adelaide Crow to become first time All Australian this year is Isaac Rankin. Absolute gun player, no doubt about it. Has the potential to be one of the very best in the competition, and from Adelaide's list, I think he's the most likely to be a first-time All-Australian. Other players to contend, maybe Ben Keys if he can step up into that small forward role, slash midfield, could get a half forward flank spot, and Darcy Fogarty in the forward line as a key forward. If he can kick 55 plus, which he's more than capable of, I think, in a season, potentially he could be good enough to make it as well. Most of the other good players in Crowland have already done it, become All-Australians, mainly Jordan Dawson. I don't see too many other players contending for All-Australian. There might be some young players in the coming seasons, but in 2025, I think Isaac Rankin's clear pick to be the best chance to be a first-time All-Australian on the Crows list. Next up, we've got the Brisbane Lions. And I've gone Cam Rayner, playing that half-forward flank slash pinch hit in the midfield role. I think he showed glimpses last year that he's really ready for this potential role of having 22 touches a game, kicking multiple goals a game. His prelim final was really good. He played some really good football throughout the year. He did have some quiet games, which he probably just needs to tidy up a little bit. But he's more than capable of being good enough in that half-forward flank slash midfield role. The dual role that is probably the most, I'm not going to say the easiest to become All-Australian, but it's probably the least amount of depth, because typically a player will go full-time mid if they're good enough, and I mean, if they're more of a goal kicker, they just stay full-time forward. So I think he's one of the better in that role. Similar role to Rankin, in all honesty, but I can see him being a first-time All-Australian if he lives up to his potential that he's shown. Other options from Brisbane, there's a few, to be honest, but the next two that I looked at were Will Ashcroft, Norm Smith medalist last year, fantastic ball winner, really good user, very good player, so I think he's a chance. And as a full-time forward, small forward that is, Kai Lohmann, I wouldn't put it past him being capable of doing it. Callum Archie's similar, but I've gone with Lohmann. His final series was really good. His start to the grand final was exceptional. It's a hard role, but it's a role where there's probably potential for a couple spots in the All-Australian team. So I wouldn't rule it out for him either. We'll jump on to Carlton. And I've gone Elijah Hollins, which might surprise a few, maybe surprises me a little bit. There are other players. Tom De Koning's probably the other big one. The ruck role is a very hard one to become All-Australian in, mainly because Max Gawn has it sewn up most years. But, I mean, he doesn't have that many left. But there are plenty of good ruckmen coming through as well, so it's not an easy spot on the field to become All-Australian. Tom De Koning could do it, though. He's more than capable. Blake Acres on the wing is another role that could potentially get him All-Australian. He'd have to be better than he was last year, in my eyes, but I wouldn't rule it out. Elijah Hollins, though, he's also kind of that wing role, half forward, half back flank. I think we'll see a really big improvement from him in 2025. I don't know if he will become All-Australian for the first time, but I think he's maybe their most likely, in all honesty. Jumping on to Collingwood, I've gone Jordan De Goey, a player that at his best 2 years ago was sensational. Didn't quite make the All-Australian. He did make the squad of 40 for the All-Australian. So clearly has enough talent to do it. He just needs to... If he had have played that whole season, he probably would have been All-Australian. He got rubbed out for 3 weeks, I think, for a head-high bump mid-season. And if he had played all those games, he may well have been All-Australian. But he wasn't. And last year, he was nowhere near All-Australian. So he would need to get back to his best, but I think he's capable. Another couple of players to look at. Darcy Cameron in the ruck. Once again, the ruck role's not easy. He was in the squad of 40 last year, so the All-Australian selectors were looking at him. And thirdly, for Collingwood, Bobby Hill. He would need to improve what he's done to a more consistent basis, but he certainly has the talent. If he can have a 40-plus goal season, maybe 45-plus goal season, he may well be in contention for his first All-Australian. Next up, we've got the Bombers. I think the most obvious one is Nick Martin. He's, in my eyes, clearly their second best player at the moment, behind Zach Merritt, who's a 3 or 4-time All-Australian. I think Nick Martin well and truly has the talent. Tidies up his disposal, gets used a bit better. He could really be good. I think he wasn't far from All-Australian last year. I think he's their most likely. Cole Langford, he would need to have a 50-plus goal season. He started last year really well, especially as a lead-up forward. His second half of the year dried up in goals a little bit, which cost him a bit. I don't think he would have been there anyway, but maybe if he improves to a little bit, gets a bit more use, he's going to have to probably be more of a vocal point down there with no stringer anymore. So we'll see how that plays out for him. And the third one I was looking at was Jordan Ridley. Obviously injured now. I don't know the full extent of Ridley's injury, but I think he's more than capable. He's been, I think, in the All-Australian squad once, back in like 2021-ish kind of time. So I think he's capable. We move on to Fremantle. They've got a stacked midfield, let's be honest. Brayshaw's been All-Australian. Sarong has been All-Australian. And I wouldn't be surprised if Hayden Young got there this year or next. He's someone that complements the other two really well. He's that, I won't say finisher, but he's the one, the other two are the clearance getter, the ball winner. They give it to Young, and Young's the one that delivers it. So he gets plenty of it. He uses it pretty well most of the time. So I think, depending on what happens with the rest of the team, he's certainly capable of being a good enough player to be All-Australian. I mean, you look at Sydney last year, they had 3 midfielders that were All-Australian in Heaney, Warner and Goulden. So there's no reason that Fremantle couldn't have 2 as well. They shape as a team that should be playing finals and deep into finals this year. Other options for Fremantle, Josh Tracy had a really good year last year. If he develops like that again, he'll be up there as a key forward for sure. And Alex Pearce as a key defender is potentially there, to be honest. He's in the top half a dozen or so key defenders in my eyes. I think he's got a bit of work to do to catch the top couple, but I certainly wouldn't rule it out for him. We go to Gold Coast next. And Matt Rowell, how this guy doesn't have an All-Australian already is kind of absurd to me in a way. He's an absolute clearance king. He's a contested tackler. He's still a ball winner. Very good player. And I think he will eventually be an All-Australian. Whether it's this year, next year, you'd have to think what he's shown us so far, he's more than capable. And I think one of the most likely on this list to be All-Australian for the first time. Sam Collins, key defender, also more than capable of being All-Australian. He was in my best 22 last year. I think we'll see him probably get there. If he plays as good as last year, there's no reason why he can't and shouldn't. So he could be someone that goes in this year as well. And Sam Flanders, it'll be interesting to see what role he gets this year. He's probably going to get a lot more midfield time. Hard to get a spot in the All-Australian team as a midfielder. I know they select a lot, but also there is a lot of good players in that midfield role. So he's going to have his work cut out, but he is someone that we would look at. Next up, GWS, another absolute gun midfielder who hasn't got an All-Australian nod yet. Been in the squad, he's a gun. Tom Green. He racks them up. He is their most important player in the midfield, I think. He does really well week in, week out. And I think another one like Matt Rao that is only a matter of time before he does become All-Australian, in all honesty. Other options at the Giants. Kieran Briggs, ruckman. I think he's probably was in the top 4 ruckman last year in the AFL. So he's got a bit of work to do, but all it takes is one of them to get injured and all of a sudden you're right in the conversation. So he's a potential one. And thirdly, this is a little bit left field, probably not expected by most people, but I've gone Connor Iden. A bit more of a lockdown role as a medium-sized defender than what most medium defenders that end up All-Australian are. But his lockdown role as a medium defender, I think, was the best in the competition last year. He was outstanding. His numbers were really good, and he's very consistent. So I wouldn't put it past him becoming an All-Australian for the first time at some point. Geelong is next. We got Maxi Holmes. Surprisingly didn't make the team last year. He was in my best 22 again, another one that I had different than the All-Australian selectors. Gets a lot of it, plays really well. Wouldn't be surprised to see him get the nod as that half-back flanker that uses the ball really well. A couple other options at Geelong. There are a few, actually, to be honest. But Brian Myers, if he gets back to his best, where he's dishing off a lot of goals, scoring a lot himself, getting around about that 20-22 disposal mark most games, look for him to be a chance. And thirdly, depending what role he gets, what sort of fitness and all that he comes back in. But Bailey Smith didn't play last year. There's a lot of hype about this guy. If he's just let loose in this Geelong midfield, sky's the limit for him, in all honesty, and he's definitely capable of being good enough at his best to be in the All-Australian team. Next up, we've got Hawthorn Hawks, Hawkball. They're flying late last year. John Newcombe would have been All-Australian if they had have started the season a bit better and he had started the season better. His back half of the season was definitely in the best 22 in the competition. His just numbers weren't quite there at the start. A rookie drafted player, that's just ever since he's joined the club, just leaps and bounds. He's an absolute class midfielder. From what we've seen the last 2 years, I think he'll be All-Australian in the next couple years at least. One of them. At some point he will be. Other opportunities at Hawthorn. Tom Barrass hasn't done it as a key defender. It'll be interesting to see how he goes. Hawthorn do have a stacked amount of key defenders. He's obviously going to be getting games. He will probably be their number 1 key defender. It'll be interesting to see how that kind of role works when he's coming from a team where Jeremy McGovern was the main ball user for the key defenders. We'll see how he plays here. Another option that might happen, a small forward, Jack Ginnivan. His best games last year, he was getting 20-25 touches and kicking a couple goals. If he can do that more consistent basis this year, it's not out of the realms of possibility that he would be All-Australian for the first time. Next up, we have the Melbourne Demons. I've gone Koshia Pickett. He's suspended for the first couple of weeks, which doesn't help his cause. He needs to stop bumping people high. There's no doubt about that. Hopefully he's really knuckled down on that and working on it. I think by far he is the most likely Melbourne player to be a first-time All-Australian either this year or next. Has the potential to be an absolute gun. When he goes into the midfield, he wins the clearances at a really good rate. When he's forward, he's contributing and creating goal opportunities that not many players in the AFL can do. So I think he's someone that if he can find his best and stay on the park, whether it be injury or suspension, he's someone that could really, really take off and become an All-Australian. I've gone Christian Salem and Bailey Fritsch's other opportunities. I think Bailey Fritsch's time has probably passed, but his best was almost All-Australian. And Christian Salem, I don't think he'll get there either, to be honest. But Melbourne's list at the moment is an interesting one. A lot of top-end talent. Petrarca, Gawn, Clayton Oliver. Between them have like 15-ish All-Australians. I don't know off the top of my head. Gawn has 7. I think Petrarca has 4. Oliver has 3. So 14 maybe between them. So they have that top-end talent. They just don't quite have that emerging talent just yet, but they might. As the season progresses, we'll see. But that's my thoughts on Melbourne. We've gone the wrong way. Bear with me. North Melbourne's up next, and I've gone Tristan Xerri. I think there was probably, in my eyes, 3 ruckmen last year that were the chance for All-Australian. Max Gawn was my pick. And then second and third, you could have gone Rowan Marshall or Tristan Xerri. So based on that, you'd have to think, you don't have to think, but those are probably the next 2 in line, Tristan Xerri and Rowan Marshall. For that ruck role, if Gawn does drop off or he gets injured or anything, these 2 are going to be the 2 that potentially move in there. He's good in the ruck. He's good in clearances. He as the players around him also develop, a lot of young players. I think you'll see his ruck work improve, and you chuck in a bit more experience this year in Luke Parker potentially coming into that centre bounce a lot. Really might help him as well. Second pick and third pick, 2 midfielders. Harry Sheasel, I think he will eventually be an All-Australian in almost certainly, you'd think. He's up there with the best players in the competition already. He's going to get more midfield time this year, so it's not going to be an easy role for him to get All-Australian, but I certainly think he's capable. And third up, Luke Davies-Yanaki. He's really starting to find his best now. It's taken him a little bit longer than most, but he's really starting to develop. And if he improves as much as he did this year, he'll be a chance, no doubt about it. Next up, we have Port Adelaide. And I've gone Jason Horne-Francis, no surprise here. He's someone that played a lot of midfield/forward time last year. The more midfield time he gets, the better. It's not the easiest midfield to be getting time in, with Rose and Butters as well in there. He's very good when he goes forward as well, though. So he can kick goals, he can win ball. He's pretty much what you see in an All-Australian, in all honesty. So I think we'll see him definitely get there at some point. And who's to say that this year won't be that year? Port Adelaide, fancied by a lot of people to go pretty well this year. And if they do, he'll be right up there. Other opportunities for All-Australian have gone a couple forwards. One at all in Mitch Georgiadis. His growth and development, he's very good up forward. When he's on, he just needs to get that consistency going. He has a tendency to sometimes be quiet for long periods of the game, but he can certainly break a game open, and I think he's their best key forward. And Willie Rioli plays mainly forward, occasionally moving up the ground a little bit, but pretty much full-time forward. If he can kick a lot of goals this year, then who knows, he could potentially get there as well. Next up, we've got Richmond. I don't see anyone from Richmond being All-Australian in 2025. I doubt they win many games, but most likely, I think, is Nick Vlauston. The ball's going to be back there a lot. He's a good ball user. He reads the play really well. He is someone that I think is capable of All-Australian, but I don't see it happening this year. And if it doesn't happen this year, it's probably not going to happen because he is getting on. A couple other people that I highlighted, Ben Miller as a key defender is a really, really solid key defender. And Tim Taranto as a midfielder, I don't think he's quite at the level of the All-Australian midfield. But if he does grow a little bit better, who knows? At his best, he is good enough. He just doesn't do it week in, week out like a lot of the others. Next up, St Kilda. We've got Rowan Marshall. As we said when we were talking about Tristan Xerri, he's right there on the cusp of All-Australian ruckman last year, so it wouldn't surprise me to see him go to that next level this year and take that All-Australian ruckman spot. He was really, really good last year, so if St Kilda can show a bit more improvement and development, we'll potentially see him get to the point where he is an All-Australian ruckman. Other people at St Kilda, Nashaya Wanganeen Malira was really good last year. He improved heaps. He's still really young. His best football's ahead of him, and I think on a wing or a half-back flank, he is someone that certainly could be an All-Australian this year. I don't see many other options. I did put Jack Higgins in there, but I don't honestly see it happening. Next up, we've got Sydney. Most of their good players have already been All-Australian. A lot of them were All-Australian last year. You obviously had Heaney. You had Warner, Gordon, Blakey. I think they had a fifth, I can't remember. But then you'd also have Grundy, who's been All-Australian before. And Rampy's been All-Australian before. So we had to dig a little bit deeper for the All-Australian opportunities in Sydney for the first time. And I went Will Hayward. As a small forward, he's in this team. He should be getting a lot of opportunities because their tall forwards have not been consistent or great. He did pop up a few times for multiple goals, like four or so goals in a game. He needs to do that more consistently, no doubt about it. Obviously, Papley's the main forward. He has been All-Australian. Will Hayward needs to take that role. He needs to start getting a little bit more of the ball and kicking probably half a goal a game more than he did last year. Oliver Florent, I don't think he will ever be All-Australian, but he is someone that can use the ball well. And then last one, James Rowbottom, in a heavy stacked midfield. He's the defensive mid, so it's unlikely he ever will be All-Australian. But I think if you selected a team, I reckon he is probably that best defensive midfielder. Not a tagger, but just someone that is in there tackling hard, getting in and under all the time. He's almost the best in the AFL, or he was last year in 2024. West Coast Eagles, there's a few options here, and I've gone Harley Reid because, let's be honest, the amount of ability he showed in his first season was outstanding. There's a lot of pressure on his shoulders, there's no doubt about it, but it doesn't seem to bother him at all. He just pushes people off, he runs all day, he looks like an absolutely genuine A-class football talent. And if it's not this year, it certainly will be in the next few years. Will he be pushing for that All-Australian team? Potentially one of the best players in the competition. He is a very, very good talent. Other options, Liam Baker, never been All-Australian. It'll be interesting to see what role he has over in the West, but he's capable of being a very, very high-class player. And Oscar Allen, who we mentioned before as potentially being linked with Brisbane at the moment, if they start getting the ball forward a bit more than they have over the last couple of years, he's someone that could really develop really quickly as a really good tall forward. Final team, Western Bulldogs, and we've gone Sam Darcy. Obviously, a lot of their guns have already been All-Australian. You got Bont, you got Treloar, you got there's a couple others. Anyway, Sam Darcy, I think, is that next generation of talent. As a tall forward, and I mean tall forward, he's impossible to defend when you just kick it up on his head. Mason Cox kind of did it first, but Sam Darcy's going to do it a hell of a lot better, just due to growing up playing the game. And there's going to be a lot of defenders and a lot of teams that have a massive amount of headaches about Sam Darcy over the next 5 to 10 years, maybe even longer. He's someone that could potentially kick 60, 70 goals in a season just because kick it on his head and he clunks them. So he's someone that absolutely I see as being an All-Australian key forward at some point. Other opportunities up there, Liam Jones as a key defender showed a lot of talent late last year. Could be a chance all throughout most of the year. I think his best is probably maybe gone, so he might have missed his chance, but you never know. And Cody Waitman, I think, needs to go to that next level. He missed quite a bit of football last year, but I wouldn't rule it out that he was a chance. If he got going in a team that needs a few more goal-kicking options up forward, I think it would work. If he really was that one to take that role and run with it, his best is certainly good enough to be one of the best small forwards in the competition. So that's every team's most likely to be a first-time All-Australian. Let me know in the comments below who you think is your club's most likely. Let me know if you think I've missed anyone. Also, let me know if you think I'm absolutely out of my mind suggesting somebody. Absolutely chuck them in. Let me know in the comments. We'll now quickly jump in, as I said at the start, to have a look at some list analysis. So we did it a couple of weeks ago where we looked at every club's age, experience, all that sort of stuff for the team and for the best 22. What I've now done is I've gone and put in some numbers from the last 12, 13 seasons of AFL football. So since 2012, average age, average experience of all the teams that have done well. So grand finalists, both the winner and the runners-up each year. Spit out an average and come up with some numbers of a team that I guess should be ripe for that premiership, and it's come out with two teams on top, which I'm suggesting in this video will be the grand finalists. It's not necessarily who I actually think will be grand finalists, but they came out on this data to be the grand finalists. So we'll work our way through it. First of all, the two teams that are right at the average age of the grand finalists of the last 13 years are Port Adelaide and GWS. So the average age is 24.3. Port Adelaide's 24.4 and GWS 24.2. There's a lot of teams close, but they're the only two that are 0.1 off in average age. So those two teams right at the right age. Next up, we've got the rankings of the teams. So the 5th to 7th oldest teams are the most likely to be in that right range, and they are Geelong in 5th, Carlton in 6th, and Sydney in 7th. So those three teams also all in contention. Obviously, two of them have played in grand finals in the last few years. Carlton obviously not. The next stat we look at is average games, and 66 to 70 games experience is the average for teams making the grand final. And there's 5 teams that come up in that range. They are Adelaide at 69, Essendon at 69.6, Fremantle at 67.9, GWS at 67.7, and St Kilda at 66.6. And then the final thing we look at in this little thing is average games by ranks, and it's the 5th to 7th again, most experienced teams that come up the most. Western Bulldogs are 5th, Melbourne 6th, Carlton 7th. So those 3 teams are all in there from that. You put all this data together and it spits out 2 teams out in front as the most likely teams to be primed and ready for premiership success in 2025. And they are Carlton and GWS. So don't lock it in. But also, if this does happen, come back and see me at the end of the year. Carlton GWS Grand Final. The stats say it. I don't think I fully believe it, but it would make for a certainly interesting Grand Final day, no doubt about that. So Carlton GWS, that's what the numbers say. Jump in the comments. Let me know who you think's most primed and ready for premiership success in 2025. That's all we have for you in today's episode. Don't forget to like, comment, subscribe. Head over to YouTube if you're not on YouTube already. Make sure you subscribe there because there is a lot of good content coming out over the coming weeks. Adelaide preview coming out in 2 days. It might already be out depending on when you're watching this, but that season preview and all other 17 teams will all be bangers, I guarantee it. There's going to be a lot of good information in there, so check them out. Thanks for watching. Like, comment, subscribe. As always, this is all Aussie Rules, and we'll be back with another video soon. Thank you.